I think also because I've had the loss of my mother and my son and my husband, it's made me, I'm definitely very grateful for everything positive in my life. I've had tragedies, but I'm not tragic, as I've been told I was on the doctor channel on Sirius Radio once, and someone was introducing me. She said my life was tragic, and I kind of clobbered her. And I just said, I thank you for having me on your show, but I'm going to respectfully disagree with you. My life is not tragic. I've had tragedies, but it's very different.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Welcome to today's episode. Today I'm chatting with Christina Flach. She is a founder and CEO of Pretty Girl Makeup. She is a celebrity makeup artist as well as a sepsis awareness advocate, which is one of the topics we'll be talking about today and many others. So welcome, Christina.
Hi, how are you? Thanks so much for having me today. How are you?
I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you.
As I was telling you before we started recording, I usually sit here. The morning interviews today happens to be evening as I'm interviewing, so I actually have a face on, and I was telling you, I'm so grateful I actually have something on my face as I'm talking to someone that does this for a living. So thank you so much.
I appreciate you. Look beautiful.
Thank you. Like filters on Instagram and Facebook, I'm like, man, I just wish I could walk around with one of those.
I know, wouldn't that be nice? And I wouldn't have to hire myself.
No, that's the thing. You'd lose your job if we could walk around like that, right? So let's talk about you. Tell us how it is you ended up becoming a CEO, and we'll be talking about a little grief journey as well in this process. But let's talk about your business and your motherhood and so forth first.
Okay, great. Well, I became the creator and founder of Pretty Girl Makeup, and I started it in 1999. I was a makeup artist and I was a mom, and I was driving around with all these kids, and it was a constant battle with drinking water and putting on lip gloss, and I couldn't find one that lasted. So I thought that wasn't drying my lips out and all matte. And so I thought, well, how hard can it be? I'll, get a beauty chemist and I will make my own lip gloss, and I'm sure I'll have $1 billion in the bank in, a month. Well, 20 years later.
But you were just going to snap your fingers and it would be
ignorant.
Easy peasy.
It's, I have a client, my friend Tyler Florence always makes jokes like if everyone knew how hard it was to be exceptional, everyone would do it. And it's best not to know, because
ignorance on fire, right? Ignorance on fire, as they say.
Totally. And I think it's important that you love, I've enjoyed the whole process, all the years that I've had my company. I loved creating my products. I have loved trying them out on people, and I've loved everything about it. And I think it's important when you're starting a business as an entrepreneur that you really enjoy and love what you do, because there's so many hours in the day that you're working 7 days a week, and you're not making money because you're putting money back into the business. And so you really have to enjoy it. And I think that's what's kept me going, is my passion for my company, but also that I'm still able to be a makeup artist and do all kinds of amazing projects. Yesterday I was in Denver shooting a show with Fox, which was super fun. And then I worked on a Vionics commercial the week before. And, I was with Tyler for 6 weeks doing the Food Network big food truck race that's on Food Network.
I love it.
I
love Tyler Florence. It's I remember the Throwdown. Something Throwdown was one of his shows.
Yes, he's lovely. He's as nice in person as you see him on TV. He's got the best laugh and great energy, and he's just a great human. So he's been my client for 15 years, actually more, 15 years. And so I always love when I get to shoot with him, and having this time with him shooting the show was a lot of fun.
That's so awesome. So you do hair and makeup, male, female, everything, and then you do
Everything.
fashion as well?
I do.
Everything.
Yes, I
Yes,
do.
no,
It's
so
fun. It's fun having different things. I had a movie director come in from Canada a couple of weeks ago, and I did her. I don't know. It's always something different. And then, I still do brides every once in a while, and I love what I do. It really
that
is
is
so
that
fun.
is so important. And what you said before about being able to start something because you saw there was a problem, that you saw there was a need, you
Yes,
needed something, you
yes,
created then something because you were
yes.
looking for a solution. Um, that in itself is something that I feel like for myself, even creating this podcast was something I felt there was a need to have more of these conversations about grief and gratitude and kind of how
Right,
do people move through life after experiencing something hard and how do they get through to the other side. So
right.
yeah, so that is something we have in common. Now tell me then, with COVID and all that, with your career, with a lot of things being shut down, what happened there with your career even there in these
Oh, it
last
was
couple
it
of
was
years?
it was really hard for over a year. I mean, I even told my I work for Fox and Food Network a lot, and I contacted my producers there, and I said, "I'll work. Like, send me wherever." And I had a couple things, but I never thought in a million years. Like, I thought my job was bulletproof. There's always a wedding. There's always a
Right.
TV, a
There were no
movie.
events,
There was
right?
no
No
nothing.
weddings.
There was no wedding. There was no nothing. It was so crazy. And I didn't realize how much my job defines who I am as a person.
Ooh, ooh.
I really didn't know until I couldn't do what I love doing so much, and how much I love doing what I do and traveling. I'm on a plane every week, a couple of times a week, and I missed it. I miss the human contact, and I'm so grateful that things are back to normal, and I'm traveling more than ever, and I'm working more than ever, and getting to do these great projects. I am really grateful, but it was a
Wow.
really hard time. And on top of which, I always figure there's plan A, plan B, and God forbid plan C. And so, I have Pretty Girl, and then I, do all my makeup, but then both of plan A, B, C, and D were gone. So it was not, I did some consulting for some other companies. And so you just figure out ways to keep busy. And I got a new business partner, and we have put together a business plan, and we're getting investors. So we're going to expand. So, I mean, you can always make lemonade out of lemons, I
Yes.
think. And I tried my best. I worked out a lot. I read. I spent time with my family, and I just tried to be as normal as possible. Go outside and hike and ride my horse and
Just
live
yeah,
life.
just be
I just
the
lived
the
life.
thing,
I
yeah.
pretended COVID didn't exist, actually. I just was
You
like, I'm
know,
not going to sit and talk about it all day. It's so boring. It's so out of our control. And
Yeah, just live. Yeah, it's kind of, what you just shared right now, you shared exercise, you shared being out in nature, you shared things in which are ways in which a lot of us end up using as tools to even navigate grief. And
right,
in some way, like you said, your identity to your job, your job defined you, and then all of a sudden it's like swept from under you
right.
in the last couple of weeks, years,
Years, right.
weeks, weeks, I wish,
Yeah,
years. And you had to find ways to cope with all these feelings. So, were some of these tools that you just mentioned tools you've also used in your grief journey before? And if we want, we could let's.
absolutely.
Okay,
So,
yeah,
yeah, like
yeah.
I
Let's.
think at the beginning stages of grief, you're in so much shock, and I remember I kept saying to everyone, I just want to feel normal. I just want to feel normal
Mhm.
again. And my old normal didn't exist. So I had to
Yes.
create a new normal. It's exactly what I had to do during the pandemic. I had to figure out what my new normal was when I wasn't being a makeup artist, and no one was buying lip gloss because everyone was wearing a mask. So, I think at the beginning stages of grief, it's like I always felt like everything was worse if I got too hungry, too tired, I didn't exercise, and I didn't think about the things that I'm grateful for and all the great blessings I have in my life. So when I kept all of that kind of in check, everything was softer. If I
Hmm.
got too tired, too hungry, if I got any of those things, I got them out of control, everything just seemed so much worse than it was. So I know that those are my triggers, and so I really try to make sure that I get enough sleep and that I exercise and that I eat well and I drink a lot of water and I think about things I'm grateful for. And life just seems to move along forward in a more positive, productive way.
To fall into place. Yeah. The things you mentioned show you're really intuitive, because a lot of times we do not know what we need, right? Sometimes we're like hangry and we don't even know that it's because we're,
Right,
hungry, and we're just angry and not knowing. So you're
right.
really intuitive. And we're going to go now into then your past. So let's go all the way back to your childhood, because I know you've had three major uh, grief experiences that have to do with death. So we're going to go back into your childhood and your journey with your mom, and just tell us more about your age and then what you did then navigating your grief journey at that point.
So my mother, when I was about 8, was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer and had a 1% chance to live 1 year. She thankfully lived 13 years.
Oh.
So we were very blessed to have her, but her quality of life wasn't fantastic. My mother was unbelievably beautiful, and she lost her hair and her skin got discolored from, the amount of radiation and chemo that they gave her. They never even, I think it's illegal now, right? But so I guess as growing up, I just, I seen my mother sick all the time, and I just wished that she could be normal. That was always my big thing, being normal. It's funny that I'm noticing that now, but I wanted her to be like all the other moms, right? So that's why I think I've tried so hard to be a normal mom, even though my kids, I'm sure, think I'm a weirdo. But I played tennis during my childhood. I played competitively. I played junior tournaments and went through high school and college playing tennis. And so I turned pro for half a second, and that was always a consistent thing in my life. So I think I've become very disciplined because of playing tennis so much, and my mom being sick, and I had to help cook and clean and take care of my sister and help with,
So you were the oldest one.
Yes,
you were
I
the
was
oldest one.
Yes, and so
Okay.
I think that's me. I'm still to this day incredibly focused and disciplined, and I think that helps me to achieve my goals and to kind of keep things in perspective. I think also because I've had the loss of my mother and my son and my husband, it's made me. I'm definitely very grateful for everything positive in my life. I've had tragedies, but I'm not tragic, as I've been told I was on the doctor channel on Sirius Radio once, and someone was introducing me, and she said that my life was tragic, and I kind of clobbered her, and I just said, I thank you for having me on your show, but I'm going to respectfully disagree with you. My life is not tragic. I've had tragedies, but it's very different. Being tragic means I've given up and I'm wallowing and miserable. And I have kids, and I want them to be happy. And if I'm a disaster, it's going to affect them. They've had enough to deal with in their life, with their brother passing away on Christmas Day and Ken passing away, and now their father has stage 4 cancer, but he's doing fantastic, thank God. And it would affect them too much if I went off the deep end. So I can't do that. It's not an option for me.
It is not an option for you, and you didn't feel it was an option for you either, as a kid, being the oldest one also and having to take care of your sister, and kind of just, it was 13 years also of knowing your mom had this diagnosis, so you never really knew what tomorrow was going to bring.
No, and
right?
no, and then it's funny, like now, my mom never saw who I've become, even though I do believe that our angels watch us. So I do know she's watching down. But it took me until my son and my husband passed away till I really believed it, because both Ken and my son, Bo, do things that I know they're contacting me, and it's all the time. There's been, Bo has, shown his face and like done different things to let me know he's around, and Ken all the time. In fact, today the smoke alarm was beeping for a little bit and then stopped. I mean, normally if it starts beeping, you need to change the battery.
Yes.
But it's happened twice now in this week. I'm like, what are you trying to tell me here? Just
And
tell
is it
me.
so? Do you notice if it's different? Like with Ken, then is it more like electronics, like things like that? And is it and with Bo, then
Yes.
what is it like?
He was
What?
more with Bo. Bo, because Bo is a twin of Ben, my son.
Mm,
He would contact more Ben when he was
mm,
little. Ben would tell me when he was like 4, 5, 6. Oh, Bo came to me in my dream. I mean, things that a child would never say unless it was really happening. Oh, he wanted to go up to the clouds. He wanted to
mm.
see our rebirth. Everything broke in our house one day, literally oven, dish, like every appliance. And I had that guy come out and I just said, is it just because the house is a certain age that everything broke? And he said, yeah, that's really weird. And my son was really little time. He goes, no, mommy, Bo broke everything. He doesn't want you to forget about him. And I'm like, okay, I'm
What?
never going to forget about him until we fix all that crap.
Wow.
But
Now, how old was Bo
crazy.
then? What? How
He
old
was
was
four and
Bo?
a half months on
Oh,
Christmas
he
Day when
was.
he passed away. He was very
Oh,
young. Yeah.
so for Ben growing up as a twin, he was a twin, but not actually really having
I know, but the
vivid
twin thing's
memories.
interesting. Yeah,
Yes,
but it's like it's so interesting with
it's
twins
incredible.
because they have a whole there's a
It's
whole
a whole
twin
other thing.
thing. It's a whole
Yes.
nother thing. So it's been a lot for him
Yeah.
losing Ken. That was his daddy, and
Mm.
he was such a daddy boy when Ken was alive, and now he's a lot more doesn't want to talk about him. He doesn't want to talk about his twin. So it
Mm.
does
So it kind of
it
rebirthed a lot of the the
it's
grief
hard.
then.
It's just a lot for one little human, to
Yes.
lose your twin, even though it was, he was an infant, but
Mhm.
knowing that your brother died and then your daddy died when you're 11, that's a lot to
Yeah,
deal with.
I've heard that even for twins that die in utero, that it's really
Yes,
hard for the twin that lives. So even that bond, even in utero, and then after when they have, it's kind of that survivor's guilt
yes.
sometimes, and are these other kind of emotions that are attached to that. So
Yeah,
it's
it's
just
a
it's
whole and it's a whole thing. And I mean, it's obviously affected all my children and it affected my ex-husband. He and Ken were very close. And
Mhm.
but my daughter, Melania, had come into my office right after Ken passed away. She came home from London, and that's where she was living at the time. And she said, Mommy, you just have to be grateful for the time you had with Daddy.
Mm.
Because after Bo died, he made you smile and laugh again. And all of us, he helped us heal. And I just thought, wow, God, how grown up are you to and when I started thinking about it from that perspective, that's when the gratitude started. Like,
Mm.
I'm grateful I had 8 years with Ken. He did make me laugh. He made me smile. He was such a great husband and father and friend, and he was fantastic. And I'm so grateful that I had that time with him. But and I'm grateful for my kids. But I guess that's what it is. You learn to be grateful for what you have instead of what you don't have. And
Mhm. Well, yeah, it's just all about that perspective. You kind of just shift it, and it doesn't mean you're not sad. It doesn't mean you're not grieving. It's just that you're, alongside this grief and alongside this sorrow, there's still gratitude and there's still joyful moments and there's still
right.
smiles, like you said.
Right, absolutely. I think
So,
also, you learn to manage, you don't get over it. You learn to
mhm.
manage it and you kind of put it in a compartment. Like, I'm grateful for that time. I loved him very much, but it doesn't mean I can't love again. It doesn't mean I can't, be happy again and laugh and smile and I think you have to learn. I don't believe you can. I think you can grieve in a positive way. I think you can grieve. I started a foundation for Bo and for Ken at the Northern Lights School in Oakland, California. So nutrition and education are really important to me. So I started those educational funds and then a garden at the Edna McGuire School in Mill Valley. There's a Bo Friedman outdoor classroom. So I feel that if children from a young age are presented with gardening and cooking and picking fruit and vegetables, that they're going to go into teenagers' time and adulthood having better eating habits than kids that are just not exposed to a garden. And I think it's an education. The school in Oakland is amazing, and Ben, all my kids have gone to the school to help participate, raise money for it, and help out. And there's a golf tournament every October Vita Blue puts on, and all these athletes from around the Bay Area participate to raise money for the school. And Ben has raised over $100,000 for his twin and his daddy's foundations. And I am so proud of that. And I just feel like, again, because he has done this from such a young age, I think that's just something that he will continue doing throughout his life. And maybe it won't be with that particular foundation. It might be something else he does, but I think it's in him now to give back. And I think it's super important when, especially for having someone like Ken in your life. I think it's important to use his name to honor him, but to help others, not just receive tickets to Wimbledon and the US Open. And
right. So let's go there, because our audience does not know then who we're talking about. So
sorry.
Oh no, it's totally fine, because I'm the one that started asking in a totally different order. So let's talk about then. You met Ken then. Let's say how old was your youngest then at that moment?
He was little. He was not even 2.
So Ben was 2, and then your Melania was how old? Your oldest was?
Oh my God, she was. Let's see. So she was 15.
15, and so you have 4 living children, 5 children with Bo, ranging in these ages. And so you met Ken Flach, and so he was a professional tennis player.
Yes.
So did you get to play tennis? Since you said you grew up playing tennis as a kid, tell us.
We did play tennis. But actually, he said one of my better qualities was that I hated tennis as much as he did, because he played so much growing up. But no, we hit sometimes, but not that often. But,
it must be intimidating, just like it's intimidating.
It wasn't intimidating. It was actually like, oh my gosh, to hit with someone that's that incredible, even after he retired, was like a dream. It was super fun. But he was obsessed with golf, and that's what my boys and my daughter Rose was a golfer in college. And so all they want to do is golf. So I ended up playing a lot more golf, and we played some tournaments at our club and stuff. So that was fun. And golf was his passion. That's all he wanted to do.
Tennis was his work and golf was his passion.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So take us then, because the reason you are with the foundation of Sepsis, am I saying it right? Sepsis Alliance Foundation, yes. Bringing up awareness with this is because of how Ken died. So
of course,
share with us, this was in 2018, and if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit then about that. And again, it's an education for myself and for the listener. So thank you.
So Ken and I were completely unaware what sepsis was at the time he got sick, but he got a cold and it turned into bronchitis. And he had contacted his doctor at Kaiser Permanente, and they had a vice nurse, and they didn't see him, in this whole craziness of not seeing him and not diagnosing it correctly, and then giving him the wrong medicine. And it was this whole awful thing that within 12 hours of calling the doctor, he was on life support. And because he had taken no antibiotic, even though we repeatedly said he had green and yellow coming out of everything, it turned, because if you take cough medicine with codeine and you have an infection brewing in your body, it slows down your breathing and makes the infection grow at an insane rate. So within those 12 hours, I'm like, how is he so much worse with an inhaler and the cough medicine? So I rushed him to the hospital the next day. He was spitting up blood, and he was on life support. And that was on a Thursday. And by Monday, his arms and legs were turning black. All his organs were shutting down, and we had to take him off life support. And it was terrible for his children and my children and myself, obviously. And the Sepsis Alliance contacted me and asked if I'd be willing to raise awareness and speak about sepsis, because I had no idea what it was, and I had no idea that 250,000 people a year die of it. And so I said, yeah, I would be willing to do that. And then it just kind of started that I was speaking on podcasts and TV, and then the ATP Tennis Association did a Ken Flach golf tournament in Indian Wells. So I have given out the trophy to the winner of that, because it was so great that the tennis community has been so gracious with his passing. In fact, Wimbledon was just last weekend, and they were the men's final. They were talking about Ken and Rob, his partner. So it was really lovely. But I I'm so grateful that I'm able to honor Ken by raising awareness and educating people about the signs of sepsis. If your listeners go to sepsis.org, there and scroll down, there's a little diagram that says time. And what time is T is for temperature. You can be incredibly hot or incredibly cold. I is for infection in some place in your body, whether it be an infected tooth or a cut or bronchitis turned to pneumonia. M is for mental decline. It's just they're kind of fuzzy and they're just not all there. And then E is for excruciating pain. You feel like you're dying because you are dying. Your organs are shutting down and the pain is just awful. And I think that because of, those signs, the thing is with sepsis, it's totally curable, but it's not one of those things like, how you get, you have to know your body. Mm-hmm. If you know how you feel when you have a cold or a flu, what that feels like. Well, this is something that you don't know. So you really have to be aware and know your body to go, what, this isn't right. Or listen to your spouse or your loved mm-hmm. one that's telling you like, no, we're going to the doctor.
Yeah. And if they're saying you're kind of, you're sounding, like if the mental decline, then do they sound like, would they sound kind of incoherent?
Yeah. They're just like kind of a little off. And so mm-hmm. I think it's been so amazing. So the past 4.5 years that I've been doing this, how many people, one of my new best friends, she's like my sister. A year after Ken passed, she heard me on an interview like this. And she sent me DM'd me on Facebook, and I normally never respond to those, but I don't know why I did that day, but thank God I did. And she's like, I think my husband has sepsis. And I'm like, get him to the hospital. And we saved him. And then it was so weird. So she and I became friendly. And 2 years later, like a few days before Ken's passing, he had gone to have surgery at Stanford and got sepsis again. And he died. And she called. I was like the first person she called. And I'm like, this cannot be happening again to her. And so she and we have this like sister bond. And so mm-hmm. I had a lawsuit against Kaiser and I won. And it was just felt so important to me for them to acknowledge what they did. Mm-hmm. And it's so wrong. Here in California, if someone dies, there's like the most you can get is $250,000, right? And anything, the only way, because it took over 4 years for my lawsuit to happen.
To finish.
Yeah. And so I was blessed. I have this amazing lawyer, Scott Righthand in San Francisco. He's a total rock star. He took on my case and he worked his ass off and was amazing. And we won. But if the only way a lawyer will do that is if there's economic loss. That's the only way that you can, get, and it's not about the money. It's about, to just hear from a judge acknowledging that because of the advice nurse not doing her job and the doctor not doing his job, Ken died. Mm-hmm. And to hear that, my God, was so intense. It was, it was really like, I was so happy to hear that, but then I was really angry just to think that, God, that he died needlessly. It sickens me, and no one should die like that, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it's so unfair. So after this, after I won my case, I did an interview on Fox because I want there to be change in like the Kaiser system. I want every person should be seen, and there needs to be change. Everyone should be seen, and I wanted people to know what the signs of sepsis are, and so. I cannot tell you how many phone calls, texts, emails. I have gotten hundreds of people contacting me, wanting to know who my lawyer was. How did I do it? And it got to the point that I have to like be really honest with people, saying like, I'm sorry that your 80-year-old grandmother died at Kaiser and she had sepsis. It's her. No one should die this way, and it's awful. But if there's not economic loss, no, you can't sue. And it's so not fair. There's a stupid law in California that protects these, people like, these companies like Kaiser Permanente, that it's kind of conflict of interest if you think about it, because they're insurers, but they're also the doctors. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So And then you also, unbeknownst to me, when you sign up with Kaiser, we were only with them from January until March when Ken died. 2.5 months, and he died. And
you had only been with that insurance those few months?
Yes, because we're both self-employed. And so, it's so unfair that, you don't know what you're signing. You just sign up for the insurance. But with Kaiser, you're also signing that you agree if there is a lawsuit to arbitration, like not to have a jury. If I'd have been in front of a jury, it would have been even been more. But it's because they would have heard all of this, and it would have been more public, and it would have been more damaging to them.
It's just so much. Okay, so I want to backtrack here, because you only really had then 4 days from the moment he went into the hospital to his passing. Was it about 4 days? Was that about how long it was?
Yes.
About that. Okay. So with that, then he passes. What did you do to navigate then your grief at that moment? Because you're also then adding to that list of, aside from your grief, everything with the lawsuit. So how do you do that when you're navigating these two different huge emotions? There's a huge anger because somebody is at fault kind of aspect, and then your grief itself for the loss.
Right. Well, I think at first I was just like in such shock that it happened. But then I think I just was trying to find my way. I was just trying to be the best mom I could be, run my business, try and I kept thinking, my agent called and she said, "What can I do?" And I said, "Just book me a shoot." And she's like, "Your husband just died." I'm like, I know that. I don't care, but that's where I feel normal. Again, the normal coming out.
Yeah.
I feel my best when I'm on a photo shoot. And then she booked me a job with Third Love. It's like a lingerie brand. And
I've been meaning actually to check that. I get those ads on Instagram offer. I'm like, I wonder if it's good.
Yeah, they're great.
Okay.
And I remember, I kept thinking, as soon as I get to that shoot, I'll feel okay. But I got there and I wasn't okay. I was a mess.
So what did you do? What did you do? Because here you are, you're in front, you're like, this is not like you can hide your emotions. No. I was actually even going to say, because as a makeup artist, I'm assuming, and as a hairstylist, I'm sure it's similar to when you go to get your hair done, that your hairstylist becomes your therapist almost. I'm sure people share their life with you.
Oh, they tell me everything.
Everything, right?
You have no idea.
I could totally imagine 2 hours of you doing all their face
and you're with them all day long. It's like going to camp, right?
So how did you do then? Here's you with you have your things now here and with someone else.
I think God had worked with that photographer before, and I think he knew what happened, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I just was really quiet, not like myself. And I know I broke down crying, but I did my job. And then I remember I went to go work with Mark and Graham, and that's another, a Williams-Sonoma company that I work with all the time. And I was just very, I'm always professional. I will always do my job. I'm not going to sit there and be sobbing, but I was just not my normal bubbly, happy self. I was just pretty quiet, did my job, and went back and to my area so I remember they always played really fun music, and this one song came on. It was called Chills, and I just remember walking back out on set in front of everyone. I go, "I like this song," and they're like,
"She spoke.
Oh, she's happy." They played that song 100 times that day, and it was so funny. They were so nice to me, but that's the thing. It was so interesting to me how kind strangers were to me. People that I barely knew, that were hardly friends, would show up at my door with food or just come and help me organize my office. It was really remarkable. I remember for I don't even know how many months, but this one woman would show up every Monday with food for me. And it just the kindness of strangers was so beautiful. It was really, really fantastic. Obviously my thing was a little bit different than most because Ken was famous and a public person, and so that made my grief a little more public so that made it even a little harder. I remember I was in Las Vegas So he died in March, and I was in Las Vegas like during Wimbledon, so that's like July. And I was doing a consulting job, and I remember walking through this casino on my way to the hotel, and it was like the most bizarre thing happening. Okay, there's all these TVs with sports on, and Wimbledon was on, and it was the first year that Ken had passed, and they were honoring him, and they kept talking about him, and like every TV there was his face, and I'm like, oh my god, I cannot even believe this is happening. This is so weird. This is so fucking weird that my husband's died. I'm consulting for a company. And his face is all over.
So then it's like, what do you do then? Like, because it is like you said, he is a public figure. You're with public figures all the time as well. So it's like you cannot hide. It's right in front of you all the time. So
Right.
you have to be able to face it, like they say, every single time. So with Ken passing, how did then your grief of your mom and then your son, Bo, did that end up coming up to the surface again then?
I think it did. I think I was a little more prepared for when Ken passed, that I knew that I couldn't go off the deep end like I did with Bo. I mean, your son dying on Christmas Day, in your arms is just so traumatic, like in itself. And I started taking like sleeping pills during the day just to like numb myself. So I did that for like a month. And then my friends are like, okay, you're not a drug addict, so enough. And so I just knew, like with Ken, I went the exact opposite. I worked out twice a day. I'd go to yoga, I'd go to Pilates, I'd ride my horse, I'd go for a walk. I would do something because I was so anxious. I, again, made sure I ate, even though I couldn't really eat. My girlfriend Trudy was so sweet. She's Irish, and she would make this Irish bread. That's literally all I ate. And all these things that I just tried to keep on track and just not go. I couldn't go crazy. I couldn't like drink. I mean, I couldn't allow myself to do that, because my kids, I'm like, they're gonna like lose their shit if if I'm off my rocker. So I just became extra disciplined, and I think that's really what saved me. And I thank God had my company and my work that brought me joy, and I prayed and I was grateful, and it was a hard time. It was really a hard time.
So you were saying like you just couldn't fall apart at that moment because you also had to be able to help the kids
Right.
navigating their grief. So when your son Bo passed away, the same thing. Yes, you could wallow for a few, like you said, like a month. Then your friends were like, no, you got to kind of
you got to get it together. You're not an addict. Like, you don't even know what you're doing. I remember, I think also, like, we live in a small town in Mill Valley, and everyone knows our family because we have 1 million kids and they all play sports. And so, unfortunately, and that was great. People are very kind and everything, but I just felt like everywhere I went, everyone was looking at me like, oh, that lady's baby died on Christmas. Like it's a Lifetime movie that'll never air. It's so crazy. No one would believe that this happened. And so I just remember, like, anytime I'd go to the supermarket, I'd wear a baseball hat and glasses, and I'd just keep my head down. I think the hardest thing for me dealing with grief is I don't like people looking at me with pity. I hate it. Like, even when my mom was sick, like when I was growing up, they're like, oh, her mom's sick. Like, I think that's one of the things that I really don't like, is just people feeling sorry for me. I don't like that. I don't like that. So I just made no eye contact for a really long time. And, time does soften things and you heal. But, it made me happy to, and then here's the other thing I've had to, so my ex-husband grieve, he is super private, and he doesn't grieve the way I do. I started these educational funds. I started the garden. I speak. I do this. Like, he would never. And I used to resent him that he wasn't more supportive of my foundations and my garden and all that. And he thinks it's great that I do this, but I don't say his name publicly. But I did judge him for a really long time about I think I think that's kind of helped my relationship with him, not my relationship, but more like how I have forgiven him because
Mhm.
I was angry at him for how he grieved because it wasn't like I do. And I've learned that everyone does grieve differently. And I went to a grief camp at Canyon Ranch and I read this fabulous, well, the author of this fabulous book that I'm going to tell you guys about is Rabbi Sherry Hirsch. She's from Los Angeles and she wrote the book, We Plan and God Laughs. And it's a great book for anyone to read, whether you're grieving or not. It teaches you to that life is always going to have bumps and you have to learn to ride the waves and people die. Of course, I've had a little bit more than most people at a young age, that I'm widowed and lost a baby and my mom, but everyone's going to die. Everyone's husband, wife, child, people are going to die, unfortunately, but that's just how it is. But I also feel that I believe that when we die, you go up to heaven and you're back with your people. So to me, I don't fear death the way I did before. I am like, well, when it's my time, I'll go up there and I'll be with my mom and my, son and Ken and everyone else, all
You have a
my
welcome
cousins.
committee.
I've got
You
all
have a
kinds. I've got
welcome.
so many angels up there. So
Yeah, you
I
have a welcome committee
yes,
about to greet you. Yeah,
yes,
it changes. Yeah, because there's actually a longing when my mom passed away. When my sister passed away 26 years ago, and sorry, 25 years ago, and my mom passed away 5 years ago. So when my mom passed away, my dad, there was an aspect of like, oh, she's gonna be with Zorana. That like what you're saying now. It's
yeah,
like there's actually a somewhat of a even like a longing, not that you want to leave this life either, but there's that other
no,
aspect like, oh, I don't fear it anymore.
no, you don't. But
Now,
I also like. I think probably like my worst, like for me, losing another child would just
mhm,
it would.
mhm.
That's probably I think I can like I can deal with pretty much anything, but to lose one of my kids now, but see, then again, there's the other kids that are remaining. God forbid something happened to one of them, or all of
Mhm,
them. It's
mhm,
like
mhm.
it's it's tough
No,
sometimes.
no, it is still hard. It doesn't mean that because you've already been through one grief experience that you'd be able to, kind of hop on the next one with ease. No,
No,
each
you
one
wouldn't.
is still
No, each
no,
one
it
would be
isn't.
off. It's kind of like when I took my kids to college. Um, I've taken 3 kids to college now, and each one it's been awful. I've cried my guts out leaving my kids at college. I took 2 to New York, 1 to NYU, 1 to Parsons, and then 1 to LA to Occidental. And I tell you, I dropped them off and I like begged them not to go, and I cried. And it's hard for me to. I probably have a little. I don't like saying goodbye to people. I tell everyone I love them so much, and I think, yeah,
That-
so there's some things I've had post traumatic shock, but I've also had post traumatic growth, and I think I know what I've grown on, and what's made me be stronger and better. I mean, I didn't know how strong I was, but I also know that there's some things that I do have triggers. I have abandonment issues, obviously.
well, you've been experiencing it since your mom died when you were, little.
Yeah,
That's one. Then
yeah. It's like,
your
and then I thought,
spouse.
after Bo passed, I thought, oh, I'm golden. Like there is no, nothing more bad can happen to me. And so when Ken died, I was just like, how is this actually happening to me? Like,
It's so much, but then like you said, you realize how strong you are. Like you don't know how resilient you are until you go through these things, right? And then your kids, then also you realize how resilient they've been
right.
in all these journeys as well. You're seeing their growth. And we never know who we would have been had we not gone through something
I just
hard.
read an interesting book, and it was about a girl that like married her high school sweetheart. They moved to LA, and then like the day before their first year anniversary, the husband, they were supposed to go somewhere, but he was a photographer and he went to go do this photo shoot up in Alaska, and then he disappeared and died. He died. And then she was a disaster. And then she went back to her hometown, and like 3.5 years later, she met the other boy she had dated in high school and felt like she was getting engaged to get married. And then the husband comes back. He didn't die. He was stranded on some island and, all that.
Wait, this is how much? No.
Yeah, no,
This one's talk about Hallmark or Lifetime
totally.
movies.
It
This
was
one,
such a good book. And it was by the lady. Okay, so I saw this book called The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo in an airport. I kept seeing, because I travel so much, I see it in airports, and I'm like, I read that book and I loved it. It was fantastic. And the title is, don't judge the title. It's a great book. So that author, I do this typically. If I find an author I like, I'll read every book. I just stay with, because I'm in that flow. I like how they write.
Yes.
So I started reading this book. But what was so interesting about it was how in the 3.5 years that how much she had changed. Mm-hmm. And that when the husband came back, he was like, let's just, she was like in love with this other man, but it wasn't even so much that. It was, she wasn't the same person that she was when she was married to him. She had cut her hair, all these different changes, and her husband, they didn't make it. And it was because she's like, I don't want to live in LA anymore. I want to live in this small town. And he goes, well, I don't like even your haircut anymore. Like, who are you? Like, I want the girl that I left. And she's like, I'm not that girl anymore. So that was so interesting, because I'm in a relationship now with someone, and I think how different I am now with him, like how much I have changed since I've known him. It'll be 3 years in October that I've known him, and how different I am even from when I first met him, how different I am. But it's been like we've been able to like change together. Mm-hmm. So it's so interesting, how you do change, and it's kind of beautiful to think that you can change and grow and have happiness and joy in your life.
Yeah, and it's hopeful. It gives hope. It gives hope. It gives hope. And that's the thing. If we can hold on to that, and sometimes in those moments in which we really feel there's no way I'm going to get out of this one. Like knowing that there have been other times in which we thought we were not going to get through that, yet we somehow did, right?
Right.
And that's why I have this podcast, really is for people that are going through hard times to listen to these stories of people that have gone through hard parts of their life, and then how they've been able to navigate through. So
I also think, sharing that. Of course. And I also think that, people typically that were in happy marriages tend to, their normal is to be in a relationship. So you hear oftentimes of someone's spouse dying and them getting married in a few months or in a year. And I don't judge anyone on finding a new love and it doesn't mean that you didn't love that person. That person isn't here anymore. And I truly believe that life is better when you have someone to share it with and laugh with and cry with. I do. And I think I remember when I had my first child, and Melania, and I loved her so much. And I just thought, oh my God, I was so scared. Like when I was having my second one, like, am I going to love this baby as much as I love that first one, right?
I think right? Every mom feels exactly what you just said.
Right?
Exactly. Yes.
And then it's so fabulous because it's like you grow one heart for each kid. Like I don't love one of my kids more than the other. Sometimes I like them more than the other.
Agreed.
However, the love I have for each of my kids, like I have a separate heart for them. And I kind of think it's the same. Like, I had big love for Ken, but I have huge love for my new person. And and he's very private, so I don't ever say his name,
That's fine. The ones if he hears his podcast, he knows.
He knows it's him. He knows I have big love for him. But I have my own heart that is all for him. And I think that's the best way that I can explain it. People will say like, oh, but you love that person. Well, yes, I did, but it doesn't mean I can't love this person with all of my heart.
Right. And it doesn't mean that you still don't grieve the passing of Ken either. And because
Right.
it's like, again, that's another heart that if you're
Right. Do you
mentioning, like,
feel
that
like,
other heart is still wounded, even though this new heart has this big love, right?
yes,
There's this other heart
exactly.
that's wounded.
And
So
I try,
you
and
still care for
I think I probably try to like not sit and focus on
it.
my past. Like I don't want to sit and be sad all the time. So I really just try to live with my life now and the joy and the happiness that I have in my life. And I think again, that's how I'm dealing with my life and my love and my grief, because I'm allergic to being unhappy. It
Yes.
feels weird to me to be in a bad mood or angry. So
The part that that you mentioned, even just with this, it's that aspect of having grace with ourselves, even in that journey too, right? As you're navigating, having grace in those moments in which we're not doing as great, but having again that gratitude and that hope for what's coming. And you've definitely been able to show that with your story. So thank you, Christina. Christina, any last words that you want to share with the guess of anything that I did not ask you,
what did we
or
not talk
any,
about? Yeah.
yeah, anything that we did not talk about, or any tips or any other,
I think,
I
you know
love the
what?
aspect of the
I think
hearts.
judgment. I think judgment. I think I think that it would be really great if people didn't judge others. It's so easy for people to after someone dies, they have for people that, like, let's say for example, for me, I remember after Ken passed, and they're like judging me that and I didn't meet my person until oh my gosh, 2019. So over a year, like a
Right.
year and a half after Ken died.
But
But people judged me, and I just thought, like, how dare you? You
mhm,
don't know what my life is, and how lucky and grateful am I that I met someone that made me happy. And it's so
mhm.
funny because I feel like Ken picked him because they have so many weird similarities. They both, Ken's spirit animal was an eagle, and my person has one on the same
On
shoulder that Ken had the St. Louis Cardinals tattoo. And he played baseball professionally, my new person, and he has 4 kids in the same order and the same years as Ken's kids. Like, it's
wow.
bizarre. They both have this. Oh, this is the other weird thing. This is my favorite one. I have known no other humans alive but these 2 people that squirt toothpaste in their mouth to brush their teeth.
What?
Yeah, I don't know any other humans except the 2 of them. It's so weird, right?
That is weird. I've never done. Yeah.
So
So yeah. So you feel
I feel like, maybe I think Ken picked him. So
yes,
they're very
or
similar.
you have an affinity for people that squirt. You're a magnet for toothpaste squirters in the mouth. Now you said something about that aspect of judgment. You mentioned earlier that one of the things that was hard for you was even just how your how Bo's father was grieving, how how you each grieve differently, and how you uh, went and took on to do the foundation, and how he didn't, and how you were kind of resenting him with
Right.
even just how he was grieving, and there was judgment even there. And then here you are feeling that judgment yourself then afterwards, as you're navigating the death
That's
of
true. You
Ken.
know
You're
what?
feeling that in just a different way.
It's so
You're
interesting you brought that up. I've never thought of it from that perspective. Um, I hadn't thought of that. Like, I'm here judging him, and then I'm offended that everyone's judging
is
me.
judged right. But it's sometimes, I don't know if you
Thank you for
believe this.
bringing that to me. I'm
No,
glad you
no,
told
no.
me that, because I'm like, wow. Well, thank God I fixed that. I mean, but I've acknowledged that,
That you
like,
had
I
it.
had
Yeah.
softened that,
Right.
right?
Right. But it's that part that we don't end up realizing sometimes, the things that we have to work on sometimes until it kind of faces us again, right? It's
Right.
like, oh, wait a minute. I've already navigated through that part of judging, because I've already kind of, and then all of a sudden it's kind of being thrown back at my face now with this being judged on how I'm
Right.
navigating
Right.
my grief now. And even just the part of like, whether it had been that you found a relationship or not, people could be judging you like, oh, why is she going back to work already
Oh,
again? Why is she doing
you
this?
know,
Why is she
it's
doing
so crazy
ridiculous?
that,
Yeah.
yes, people judge me. They also judge me. Like, people have gone up to my person and said things about me that are not true. And I'm like, wow, you can't be, people are jealous. And that really shocks me because I'm always happy for other people. And it really shocked me that there's been multiple times people have gone up to him and said things ill of me, of like, you know, I'm a gold digger. I only, you know, date certain kind of people, and none of it's true. And it's just like, it just shocks me. You know, thank God my
so
person,
hurtful.
it does, you know, there's been some uncomfortable moments that I've had to, you know, have conversations that are not comfortable. And like, you know, why would people do that? But they do. And then I just thought that just makes me like, God, I always go so out of my way to be, you know, kind and gracious to people. But, and they real like, and if they can't see that my life's been hard with my mom, my child, my husband dying, and that I've found happiness with someone and they can't be happy for us, like, wow, how awful is that person? How miserable is that person that it's going to bring them joy to go to my person and say something ill of me to damage us? Like, it's just, it's unbelievable.
Because it's usually a reflection of ourselves when we're doing that, not a reflection on the other person, right? It's the things that we're either lacking in ourselves or still need to work on.
Right.
That's why we're doing that with others. So it's really sad. It's really sad that that's what happened. So if we're learning something as we're listening to this, is as we're navigating grief, making sure that, or we're watching others navigating grief, not judging how they lead their lives and how they continue their lives, even in the happiness. And I've noticed that with widows and widowers, it's probably the hardest in terms of judgment of the keeping on. It's
there's a lot of judgment. Like people think, I don't know what people think. People think you should be miserable forever. People think, I don't know what, but I think that would be the biggest thing that I would say to other people is just, you know, think a minute, put yourself into that person's shoes. You don't know what they're going through.
Yeah. And a lot of times too, what I've realized, and being a daughter of someone that remarried, you know, after my mom passed, what it brought up for us as kids was our own grief. It had nothing to do with us not being happy for my dad, but it was our own grief. So who knows if like some of the people that are your closest, like if it's, I don't know, in your scenario, if it's people that you're close to that sometimes end up judging where you're at in your life. Yeah. It's because a lot of times it's probably bringing up that to themselves, the grief of missing. Yeah. So it's a combination of things. And so it's so complex. And again, it's just a reminder, we are human beings with a lot of growing to do. And in those moments in which people are going through life and going through grief, judgment should be left in the back burner, like really far away.
And, you know, I also think if someone has something to say about someone, say it to their face. You know, you don't need to, that's just, if someone has the nerve to go up to someone else to say something hurtful, I just feel like I would prefer if someone had something to say, they would say it to me. And then if they felt the need to share it with, you know, I don't know. It's so bizarre. And I think what it is that's where, when your life is public, and I really do try to protect my person because he's super hyper private. Like he doesn't like this part of my life that's so public, but he knows what I do for a living as a, you know, of a makeup company and what I do. It's like, this is part of my job. But so I really try to be respectful of his feelings. And, I have to, because it's not fair to him that my life's public and it's not his choice. So I have to be respectful of that. But I just think that it would be really great if people could be happy for I wish people could just be happy with their own life and they wouldn't give a crap about my life. My life's not that fascinating. All I do is work. You know, I work and I, you know, with my family, my kids, and my person. It's not, I'm not going out to a bunch of society parties and
Oh,
No,
Christina,
no,
but
I'm not. I know
why do
everyone
you think?
would love to think that I am, but believe me,
Right.
I'm home reading my book.
But why do you think that reality shows are such a big thing? It's like we are so consumed into wanting to be in other people's business instead of focusing on our own lives
well,
and what it is that we have to grow,
you're
right? So
right.
it's like,
You're right.
people are like, no, I want to know what she's doing. I want to know where she's going, who she's with,
Right.
instead of
Right.
working
And
on
I
this.
also think, they think, I look a certain way, that I'm a certain way. And it's so funny because I work in reality TV. Okay. Like I just wrapped a show,
Yes.
Tyler's show.
Yes.
You have no idea how scripted these shows are. They're as scripted as any TV, any reality show is.
There's still a storyline.
It's a storyline. It is very scripted. Obviously the dialogue isn't, but I'm telling you, it really is. And it's so, I just think, I'm sure people's perception of me and my life is so much more fascinating than it really is.
Well, they can make it be whatever they want to be as long as it doesn't come in and interject and intervene in yours, if whatever. But stop. So judgment, put it away, and respect people's grief journeys. These
Absolutely.
are the takeaways. Finding things that you love to do and focusing your energy on that, in your case with your business. And so tell us, how can people find you? And if they want to learn more about your business as well as the sepsis awareness, you mentioned the website, and which I'll put it in the show notes.
Yes, you can go to sepsis.org.
Any other?
Go to sepsis.org.
Yeah, any other ways? Yeah,
and my website is ChristinaFlach.com if you want to see my portfolio. And then, of course, Pretty Girl Makeup. My partner Jordan and I are offering a 25% discount code with discount code Pretty Girl, all one word, on prettygirlmakeup.com. And we're on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And I wish everyone love and happiness and joy. I feel like dream big and love big. That's kind of my.
Thank you. And dream big that you don't even know you're dreaming, and that you can even, like because what you just, even what you said before when you created your makeup line, you just, I'm just going to do it. And that you didn't even know that it was going to be hard. And you just didn't even know it was going to be hard. And here you are, a very successful CEO of a business. So
thank you so much.
Thank you so much again for taking the time to sharing your story. And lots of nuggets here, and lots of interruptions too with the dogs, which we'll try to edit, but it's part of life.
Again,
part of life.
It's like, we plan and God laughs. So
there you go.
That's a great book. It's a really good book.
I wrote it down. Yeah. Thank you once again, Christina.
Of course. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you too.
Bye.
Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.